The early firmware of the Teenage Engineering EP-133 K.O2 has a bunch of quirks. What do I mean by quirks? Well, things not mentioned in the guide, maybe not working as expected or as the guide says it should, or behavior that may just be annoying, or which actually makes it hard to use the device because my workflow habits are designed around features on other devices. And of course, maybe just outright bugs, but hey, it's a version 1, not that unexpected. I'm going to run through a few of these quirks that I've discovered in the hopes that it helps you use the KO2 without wondering if you're losing your mind. Now, if you're coming from the future and you landed on this video sometime after January 2024, after firmware 1.1.2, I'm hopeful that the Teenage Engineering EP-133 K.O2 has been updated a few times and perhaps a few of these quirks have been fixed. But for now, check these out. Erasing scenes. It does not erase patterns in those scenes. Now that might be okay, but it should be something that you know so that you don't get unexpected results later, which we'll see. So right now we're in scene 2. I committed scene 2 from scene 1. So let's listen to scene 1. Pretty simple. Now we'll go to scene 2. The bass line is a little bit different. So B2 is a little bit different than B1. Now let's erase the scene. You can see in scene 2 we have A2, B2, C2, and D2. C2 and D2 are actually empty. In it, we're going to erase by holding main, pressing erase, holding it until it stops blinking and says delete. Now scene 2 is gone. You can see I can't traverse up. And it left us back on scene 1. But if I try to, so I can play scene 1, no problem. And if I try to go up, it will not let me go up in scene. But if I look at the pattern and go up to A2 and go up to B2, you can hear that longer bassline pattern is still there, and A2 and B2 is still there. So remember that they're still there. Now that leads us to a couple of other quirks. Now that they're still there, if I commit a scene now, so let's say I go back to, well, obviously I'm still on scene 1 because it's the only scene I have. But because it did not remove those patterns, if I try to commit scene 1 now, and I recreate scene 2, this will not be pointing to A2. It'll point to A3, the next available pattern. So even though A2 is not being used in a scene, it sees that there's a pattern there. Now for the two empty patterns, C and D, it just went to the next available pattern, which was 2. But now it's offline. I've got scene 2 with A3, B3, C2, and D2 in it. So a little confusing, a little quirky. One other thing now related to that, now that I've got B2, that was a length of 2 bars, not 1 bar. If I delete this pattern, it doesn't delete everything. It just deletes the notes. The length will stay there. So I go into B2 and I erase it. If I go to re-record B2, the length is still 2. It did not reset the pattern to 1 bar, which is the default for empty patterns. Empty patterns committed to scenes actually are considered present or used when it comes to how patterns are duplicated when committing your next scene. So I'm in scene 1 and I have 2 empty patterns, C1 and D1. When I committed to scene 2, you can see it moved me to C2 and D2. Those patterns are considered used even though they're empty. So when I commit again, it will actually move me to C3. Now that's important if you think that you can actually take a scene, let's say I'm in scene 2, and I want to move my empty pattern up a bit. So let me move it up to pattern 9, just because I know it'll be empty. Let's just go to 10, because I'm going to say all my patterns are going to be within 9, but I want this to always be empty in scene 2. So I'll move it up to 9. I've done this before. And now I'm still in scene 2, but I've got C10 in there because I want it to stay empty. If I commit scene 2 to scene 3, it will actually move me past that scene, that pattern 10, because it thinks pattern 10 is being used, so let me go to the next available. So let's commit to scene 3, and now you can see in scene 3, I've got A4 because we were up to A3 before. I've got B4, but I've got C11 because scene 2 was using C10. Even though scene 1 is using C1, there's all those empty patterns in between. It looks for the next available pattern after the pattern that's used, even though it's empty. Now, a suggested fix here, make sure the patterns in every group in a scene you're about to commit are what you expect, even if they are empty, as every pattern in the new duplicate scene will be the next available pattern, considering any empty patterns used in any scene. Now, this makes it very hard to know what the next pattern will be in each group unless you just stick with what they give you, so that scene 1 has A1, B1, C1, and D1, and continuous into 2, 3, 4, 5. Erasing scenes is tricky. It pulls all subsequent scenes backward by 1. So now you can see I have 3 scenes. If I delete scene 2, scene 3 will become scene 2. So let's look at scene 3. Scene 3 has A4, B4, C11, and D3. Confusing already. But let's just make it so that scene 3 has what you might expect, just so we can see the result a little bit more easily. Now it's got all the 3s in it. Scene 3 is all the 3s. Scene 2, again, is other things. I'll just do the same thing here, make it 2s. And now I'm going to delete scene 2. That will pull scene 3 into the scene 2 slot. So let's erase scene 2, scene, delete. There's still a scene 2. That's because scene 3 was pulled in. You can see I can't go to 3 anymore because 3 was pulled in. How do we know? If we hold A, you can see it's still got the patterns that were aligned to scene 3, even though it's now scene 2. So this is the answer to why you might be getting these strange results in terms of alignment of pattern numbers with scene numbers. Remember, the other quirk is when you're in a scene, as soon as you move patterns, you just moved the pattern that's in that scene. So this is the tricky thing about the KO2, you're always in a scene. And so make sure when you're in a scene, if you're looking to listen to patterns that are up the cycle from, let's say on A, you want to hear A4, remember that you just changed the pattern that's used in the current scene that you're in. So always go back. Now, a suggested fix to this, for me, one workflow that I've been using is I use scene 1 as a work area. It's kind of like a playground and a pattern browser. So I go to scene 1 before I go traversing to listen to other things. And then I always assume that scene 1 will just be a random mix of patterns because that's where I'm browsing. Another quirk is you can't copy multiple bars. When you do a copy command on a pattern, you can either copy the whole pattern or one bar at a time. So if I do shift copy, which is shift and the group C button, you can see the first click is bar, the second click is the pattern. That's the only thing you can do. Another quirk related to copying is if you try to copy a short pattern to a long one, perhaps to get around the fact that you can only copy either one bar or a whole pattern. Let's say you have a 4-bar pattern and you want to copy it 4 times into a 16-bar pattern. You can't do that in 4 steps. You can't say copy 4, then another 4, then another 4 by copying the whole pattern. That won't work because when you paste, it will paste the absolute pattern to the other pattern in whole. So if you copy a 4-bar pattern to a 16-bar pattern, you just made your 16-bar pattern 4 bars. So the only way you can do this is to copy it bar by bar. Now, a suggested way to go about this is to copy each bar from the 4-bar pattern and then paste it 3 times or 4 times into the destination pattern. Then copy the next bar and paste it 4 times. Then the next bar, paste it 4 times at the right intervals. Now, another quirk is when sampling. If you want to try to sample a guitar, you actually have to hold the pad that you're sampling to. And I don't know about you, but I have a hard time playing the guitar with one hand. It's probably true of most instruments. So that's just more of a limitation, not just a quirk. The only suggested fix I have is to find a little heavy rock and place it on that pad. Now, another quirk is that I saw that Shift Group A on the laminated sheet that they give you with the device is supposed to be clone pattern, but it seems not to work at all in firmware 1.1.2. It shows it as a function on the laminated sheet, but it's nowhere in the guide. So maybe it was something they intend to implement, but has not been implemented yet. Now, one of the other quirks I'll just call out in the guide, there is no way to search the guide. So a suggested fix here, TE, please give us search in the guide online. Now, a good quirk, something not mentioned in the guide, I don't think, is that to double a pattern length when in record mode, you hold Shift and tap plus. So we saw before B, I'm in a 2-bar pattern. I can hold plus to make it 3, or I can do Shift plus to double it. And again, it goes by 2, so it doesn't necessarily double what's there. It actually goes 2, 4, 8. Those are just some of the quirks. There's a bunch of quirks actually on the sample tool app that I went through in another video, strewn throughout the video, but I'll probably try to consolidate them here if they continue and are not fixed soon.